Okay, so let's demystify how to color on newsprint, because this has been a very popular question that I've received over the past couple of years. People think this is like mind-blowingly difficult. It's really not. And you don't have to also ruin your artwork. You don't have to change it too much. I'll explain what works best and what doesn't work as well. But pretty much anything, any kind of art style can be printed on newsprint. Again, to varying results. We'll go over that. Okay, so before we dive right into the technical stuff, I want to look at this for a second. So this is basically what our printer gives us, and they let us know, this is what to be aware when you're working with newsprint. All right, so there's limitations on registration, okay? The registration is how colors line up. The CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K is black. Why it's not B? Well, that's because RGB. Red, green, blue. So it's K. They went with K. So it says newspaper printing is different than heat-set magazine and book printing. The thin weight and the high-speed nature of newspaper presses produce the alignment of the CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. On press, which is registration, it's rarely perfect, and it is rarely perfect. It's honestly, I'd say honestly, it's perfect most of the time. They cut themselves short a bit. Most of the books, they print great. Every now and then there's a little thing here and there, but as long as you do it right, it comes out right. 95 to 99% of the time. Type size less than 9 points should be 100% black. I recommend, honestly, 16 point and less, because font sizes fluctuate. You could have a 9-point font that's just as big as a 16-point font. I've literally used them. So I would say 16 point. I would even say go up to 20 point and make it 100% black. If you really want like a rich, darker black for your text, you can kind of put a little more color in there. And we'll go over that in a bit too. But I don't really recommend it for the most part. It can kind of start to look a little fuzzy. Building small type and color builds will make it appear fuzzy and illegible. Thin rules should be black. Color rules should be 2-point or thicker. Use as few colors as possible when making a solid color build. So what they mean by that is if you want a darker blue, don't put, some black, some magenta, some yellow, and then mostly cyan. You want to kind of create your colors, maybe 2, at the most maybe 3. Once you get into the 4-color territory, you're starting to muddy up your colors a bit. And this doesn't just apply to newsprint. This kind of applies to every kind of color you could do when you reproduce colors. So dot gain and ink density. It says cold set printing on newsprint has more dot gain than other forms of printing. So dot gain is basically, it's like what it sounds like. The printing, the color, the inks in dots, and then it spreads, it gains on the paper. If it's newsprint, it bleeds more because it absorbs more. Think of it like you're dropping a little piece of water on toilet paper. It spreads. But if you drop that little piece of water, that little drop, right on like magazine paper or any kind of glossy finish, anything like that, anything that's a little bit thicker, it doesn't really spread the same way. It's kind of the same thing. Think of newsprint as the most absorbable of printer papers when you use it, as opposed to like a 70, 80 pound, 100 pound glossy matte coated, that kind of a thing. So that'll kind of keep your mindset where you have to be. That's why also you don't want a lot of ink coverage. Ink on newsprint will absorb more and spread more than book paper. Because of the absorbent nature of newsprint, the maximum amount of ink that the paper can hold is less than what other papers can hold. Absolutely. The spreading ink also results in images often looking darker on paper than what your computer screen shows. This is another thing that's true. Okay, so total ink coverage should be 240%. This means the sum of the percentages of cyan, magenta, yellow, black for one color must add up to 240% or less. I would honestly say 220 to 230. 240 is kind of the max. Once you start flirting with 240, you can take the chance of offsetting to occur. Offsetting is basically when the ink goes from one side of the page, let's say the right side, an odd numbered page, and it's splat like silly putty. Basically what offset printing is. So you don't want to do that. I recommend 220, stay around there until you really get the understanding of what looks best. So let's get to it. Let's see some examples. Let's get to work. All right, so I'm going to bring up Photoshop here. This is what I use to do the press work, the pre-press, the prepping, the coloring, all that stuff. Now, you don't have to tweak your color style. That's something that I think some people might be confused on. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so we have several different styles here. Okay, so this page here is from Eden. This one is from Tinseltown. This one is from Mr. Crypt. And this one is from Voidwalker. You can see they all have different styles. All of them have different styles. So you don't have to be scared about it. Especially Eden is probably, I would say, the closest to what you would imagine superhero kind of, really nice coloring, that kind of a thing, modern techniques. Whereas Mr. Crypt is more cartoony. And then Tinseltown's a bit flatter. It's kind of more like an 80s comic. And Voidwalker is a mix, I would say, of the coloring on Eden and the coloring on Tinseltown. So all kind of color styles you can use here. Okay, so let's start with the simplest first. All right, so here's Mr. Crypt. All right, so when I look through here, I'm going to use the color picker and select. All right, here's a dark spot. Here's a black part of Mr. Crypt's hat. All right, so here we have ink coverage totals that total out to C is 58, M is 42, Y is 39, and the black is 100. All right, so if we add all of that up, let's see what we get. 58 plus 42 plus 39 plus 100 is 239. So it's right there. 240 is the maximum ink coverage total. Now, I didn't fully prep this page for you guys before the show. So we'll be going through this page in real time, I guess you could say. All right, so before you do that, you always want to make sure your color settings here, we already have it saved to something called NEWSPRINT Web. That's just the custom, what we've named it. Go into CMYK, do custom CMYK. You could leave that at coded, SWOP, where it says ink colors dot gain standard, and put 20% if it's not there already. This is going to compensate for the dot gain that occurs on NEWSPRINT. The separation type, put GCR. Black generation is medium. The best way to show you guys would be to do this. All right, right now I have it in CMYK. I'm going to RGB it. And then I'm going to put it back to CMYK. We've got the color settings the way they are, so it's going to automatically tailor everything so the amounts are not more than 240. That makes it automatically a lot easier to work with. And this goes for anything. You color anything you want to color, any way you want to color it. Just make sure your color settings are set the way that is. 240 is the limit, 100 on the black, everything you just saw. So here's Mr. Crypt. We want to make sure the text, the black text should always be 100% black. No other color involved. No other color in there. Right? How do you do that? You can check it really easy. You go to the channels on the right-hand side or wherever you have these listed on your Photoshop or design software program. And you can see when you just click off on the black, you can still see the black text. That's because there's still other colors in there. All right. So a really easy way to do it. If you have active text layers, the easiest way to do it, of course, is to just literally make a 100 black. So 0 on the C, 0 on the M, 0 on the Y, 100 on the K. Just like that. And then you just go through and you fill it. All right, now I'm filling it. You can't really see exactly what I'm doing. But if you notice now, a lot of that black there and up top there has disappeared. The black for the balloons, okay? If you notice the black on the balloons, it's attached. That's why we always stress to have it separated, all right? So at one point in time, the lettering here, the text was separate. When we get the files in, the lettering is on it, the text is on its own layer, and everything else is on a separate layer. So there's just two layers when we get files in. So the text, you could just easily make it black, right? Like this, there's also, you can do it, you know, the manual way and just highlight it. Now we have a Photoshop action set up to do this easily and quickly, but this is how easy that that you could do it manually. The hardest part is just tracing every single balloon. That's why it's easier to put it separately and just white out the C, the M, and the Y, and then boost up the level just like 20 or 30 on the black. So if you notice when you step out and you just take away the black, that text disappears too. And the same thing can happen for this balloon at the bottom right there. But we're not going to do that because it's the same process. All right, so now when it comes to coloring, because the lettering, believe it or not, is probably the most important thing to make sure you're coloring correctly. This is basically grayscale for newsprint. You just go hit grayscale and you're done. That's it. You can adjust and tweak something if you'd like. You can adjust the levels however you want. If you want it to print a little lighter, you know, sometimes people want that. This way there's more of a separation there. But you don't need to make too many adjustments. And you don't have to do the separations either if you're going to just print black and white grayscale. You don't have to separate the text, worry about anything like that. There's no four colors to come in and muddy it. It's just all variations of black. Okay, so here we have Voidwalker. You guys can see there's various styles being used here for coloring, for technique. When it comes to coloring this for newsprint, you want to make sure your black parts here, the darker areas, are at 40 cyan, 30 magenta, 30 yellow, 95 on the black. The most important thing you guys need to know, again, is your color settings. Go into the color settings wherever it is. This is Photoshop. But choose custom CMYK, swap coded, standard, dot gain 20%, GCR, black generation medium, black ink limit 100, total ink limit 240, and that's it. Now, again, the reason total ink limit is 240 is because you're going to get ink bleeding through or ink transferring over to the other page if it's higher than that. Even at 240, you could still get that. Like if this whole page was 240 total ink coverage, if it just literally looked like this, if it was just that, just a big black page and your ink coverage was all the way up, it's going to offset. You're going to get some spots that offset, that didn't dry properly, and they go to the other side, the other page that it's facing, the opposite facing page. So I recommend keeping your ink between 220 to 230 for the most part. The total ink between the C, M, Y, K. For the darker areas, for the blackest, darkest parts on your page, I recommend 40, 30, 30, 95. Again, this is all for newsprint, but it also could be used for any other kind of paper stock. And then the text, the black text has to be 100% black. No cyan, no magenta, no yellow. If there's four colors in there at all, it's going to print fuzzy. It's going to be blurry. We're not going to print it. Our printer won't print it. They'll actually send us a message back saying, look, you have text here that's four color. You have to change that. If you have black text in a caption that's colored, and also remember when you letter, you want to make sure that the contrast is always high. So you don't want to put, red text in a black balloon. You don't want to put gray text in like a blue balloon. It's very difficult to read. Your black text in a colored background, a colored balloon, a colored caption, that kind of a thing, matches the color that it's on, and then there's 100% black. So similar to this, again, this is 19 cyan, 37 magenta, 0 yellow, 0 black. We made sure that the text is 19 cyan, 37 magenta, 0 yellow, 100 black. This way it shows up. This way it prints properly. It's seamless. There's no white spaces in between letters and things like that. Otherwise, it can get kind of messed up. You can still read it, but it doesn't look as good. Any color style, any kind of art style, you can still use newsprint. Perfectly fine. You just want to make sure that your color separations are there. You want to make sure it's not muddy visually. How do you do that? You have to have an editing eye, because it's all adjusting to taste. So what I mean by that is, look, we can adjust this down so that it brightens up the image. Does that look good to you? It's up to you. It's up to you. Ideally, I think the image would look best around there. This hasn't been fully prepped yet, this file. This is just for an example. Some people might think this is really good, but this is very dark. This is very muddy. This is too much ink coverage. You're going to have bleed. You're going to have your dot gain destroy and ruin a lot of the art. But again, how do you determine that? That's up to you. So that's a part of it where you can't just technically pop in numbers and say, okay, well, that looks great because the number is right. So you have to determine, you have to use your judgment as an artist as to what looks good. So that part of it, we can't really explain and walk you through. But in terms of technically making sure that the ink doesn't go all over the place, that it doesn't offset, that it doesn't ruin your art, that's fine. We are all done today, right? Hopefully you feel like you could do it if you wanted to do it. But if not, thank you guys for joining. Hope you guys got something out of it. And yeah. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.